Hello there and welcome to this vlog of March 2022, and today's video will be another one of those silly comparisons that I do between two battle mechs for no discernible logical reason other than it's something I enjoy to do. Now, it's kind of important to say first up that there really is no logical reason to do this. There's kind of nothing written in the kind of BattleTech lore or in the gaming mechanics that says, well, you can either choose this mech or this mech. This is just something that I do when I kind of see a little bit of connectivity between mechs. Usually that's very subjective though. And just by way of an example, a few months ago I did a comparison video between the Awesome and the Victor. And I've always kind of had it in my mind that the Awesome is an overrated mech, and I just wanted to kind of compare it against another 80-ton mech that has a very different battlefield role, but in my mind is actually quite an underrated mech. So that's kind of where that, again, in my own head, connectivity came from with those two. Today, though, we're going to drop it down to medium mechs, and I'm going to do a comparison between the Centurion, the CN9-A, and the Hunchback, the HBK-4H. Important as well that the Centurion is just like the vanilla stock variant that I'm going to talk about, whereas the Hunchback is actually a latter version than the original, famous Hunchback that's got the AC20 on there. And why this came up as a topic is because I've been adding a few more supplementary units to my mercenary Dust Counters battalion, whether it's vehicles or other things. And I kind of decided a few weeks ago now that I didn't have enough medium mechs. I'd kind of made a bit of a schoolboy error, so to speak, because I've been so blown away with all the amazing new sculpts from Catalyst, most of which are amazing when it comes to the assault mechs and the heavy mechs. Just because the scale of them looks so big and so impressive, which we're not used to seeing really in terms of BattleTech sculpts. I think I've really gravitated towards those heavies and assaults, which is good because I kind of want my mercenary unit to reflect my kind of aesthetic taste as well. It's not just about tabletop crunch. So I like the fact I've got a Stalker and an Annihilator in my mercenary force because I like the look of those two sculpts. I think they look glorious. But as a player, I actually much prefer playing with the lighter heavy mechs and the heavy and medium mechs. So basically any mech between the range of 50 tons and 70 tons. I think that's really where my sweet spot lies with mechs. And there are those in there. I do have a Wolverine, an Enforcer in there. But I was kind of thinking it would be very unusual for a mercenary outfit, especially one as small and insignificant as the Dust Counters, to not kind of be filled up with really mid-level, mid-card, medium mechs. So I thought to myself, what I'll do is I'll basically choose two medium mechs and I'll put them on as I won't attach them to a company or a lance or anything like that. They're just going to kind of sit in reserve. Or if I need to kind of, make auxiliary forces up or something like that. And if I am playing competitively, have a couple of mechs in there that I know can just kind of slot in for cheap battle value, that kind of thing. And straight away floated into my head, it's got to be a Centurion and a Trebuchet, right? Because first of all, the Dust Counters are from Mendham, which is right on the outskirts of Federated Suns territory. And the Centurion and the Trebuchet are two mechs that are very mass produced in the Fed Suns territory, and they're two very interconnected mechs as well because they are made by the same factory, which I'll go on to talk about during the course of this video. But they're also made within 2 years of each other, and they're meant to complement each other. So, the Centurion is the medium tank that kind of goes in with its AC-10, and the Trebuchet sits behind with its indirect fire support with its LRMs. And that kind of appealed. I thought, they're both pretty cheap. They're both what you'd expect to see in a mercenary unit. It will help me to kind of supplement and flesh out the kind of medium options that I have in the in my units, especially if I wanted to do an augmented force. The Dust Counters fight often against the Capellans because they're in the Capellan March. And the Capellans have that like augmented lance option, where they kind of turn a usual lance of 4 into 6 by putting 4 mechs and 2 vehicles. And I feel like the Dust Counters would be like very inspired by that. So I'm more than happy to put like, those 2 mediums as like, accessories if you need them. I do it with scouts as well. I've got like an entire like scout lance. That's made, off the top of my head, it's got like a fire starter in there. So if they do need like a random scout option on the battlefield, that there is something that they can take. Because in the usual lances, which if you look at it from like a military law fluff perspective, lances are going to operate like a platoon would, right? Like in a military. So they're not necessarily going to all. It's not like in the games where you just put any pilot in any mech you want. As a military force, they're going to have people who are used to piloting a certain mech in a certain lance to fulfill a certain role. And let's say, like, if one of those mechs get injured, well, you can bring in like a trebuchet to supplement if you need some like LRM support. Or if it's going to get a little bit hairy, they can bring the Centurion and the trebuchet just to kind of add a little bit of fire support. So that's why I got thinking about this. And the trebuchet kind of like writes its own like destiny as in regards being in this particular like mercenary setup, because the trebuchet is such a workhorse of a mech. Like, it's not a very good mech, but it's very much like one of those Succession era trashy mechs, which is really easy to blow up because it's got very badly positioned ammo. But as an actual like fulfilling a role mech, it does a great job. It's a bit of light on ammo, but you can sit it back and just ping off its LRM-15s, of which it has 2. And when you've run out of ammo, or you get unlucky and you take an ammo explosion and you blow up, if you survive all that, then you can basically run in and it's got 3 M lasers to shoot with. Very, very average, very middle of the road. And the Centurion is also very average and middle of the road. But one important factor, and I've got loads of like BattleTech surplus, from the new Catalyst models. I've got like hundreds of leftover models. I went a bit crazy on that Kickstarter. But I'll either sell most of them like on eBay, or I'm going to start doing what I'm doing now, like just picking and choosing things. And when I kind of just thought, I'll use a trebuchet and a Centurion, I went to my big pile of plastic mechs. I don't have any Centurions left. So I thought, well, that's annoying, because now I'll have to go and buy like another box set, and I've already got far too much. So I kind of thought, I'll look at another option. And I do have a spare Hunchback. And I thought to myself, like at first, I can be a little bit like perfectionisty, if that's not a word, but I can be like, no, I'll just go and buy the box set, I want the Centurion. But when I kind of delved into it, I came across the 4H Hunchback and very quickly discovered something quite interesting about how good it is, how like close in production date it is to the Centurion, the CN9-A, which we'll talk about today. It's literally only years apart between them. But how much better it is, and how it just completely makes the Centurion absolutely redundant. I mean, competitively, I just can't think of any reason why you'd pick the Centurion over this Hunchback. And they fulfill very, very similar roles. Now, before I get into the comparison, it's probably important just to discuss very quickly about the factories that produce these mechs, just to kind of, give you a setting before we get into this. Now, the Centurion is made by Korean Enterprises. Not sure how you pronounce Korean. I'll just say Korean from here on out. I don't think I've ever heard anyone say the name, but it's quite a famous factory in BattleTech. It exists between the FedSuns and the Free Worlds League, so they've kind of got factories in both powers. And they produce, as all factories do in BattleTech, they produce lots of different items and components and electronics. But what what this particular factory is known for is its production of 3 mechs, although it does produce others. But the famous ones it produces are the Centurion, the Trebuchet, and the Valkyrie. Now, I think it's probably fair to say that is like the holy trinity of average. Let me put it to you like this. And I work in the legal sector. And at the high end of the legal sector, there's kind of this there are certain companies, I won't mention any by name, but there are certain companies that are like the McDonald's of the legal sector. So they'll just give like the most average service, but they make a ton of money. Like, these are some of the biggest law firms in the world, but they just have that like grind service. They don't really do anything bespoke. It's just they'll do whatever kind of cells, and they'll just shift resources to get lawyers in that can do certain things that are necessary at that time. And I really do think that, like, you know, I mean, that's professional services. McDonald's is fast food. In terms of Korean enterprises, they are that equivalent in, like, the BattleTech sphere. So they just churn out, like, hundreds of these very average mechs that are there to, like, supplement forces. And if BattleTech has taught us anything about military, and this is true to military history as well, it's that average usually succeeds. Like, if you have, you know, 100 blackjacks on a battlefield, that's 200 AC2s. A single AC2 is pretty useless. 200 of them will make you stop and think. So, you know, it's a bit of a misnomer to kind of just assume you need these all singing, all dancing mechs. You know, just usually you can overwhelm your opponent with powers of numbers. Something the clowns found out about. You know, they had by far the best technology in that fight between the clans and the inner sphere, but were just overwhelmed eventually by the absolute average mass of the the inner spheres. So yeah, like I said, that's where the Centurion and the Trebuchet, which we discussed a little bit, and the Valkyrie come from. And important, because I'm going to kind of tie this into a little bit of like headcanon that I think you can piece together by looking at the dates. Let's talk very quickly though about the Hunchback here, which is created in a far, far superior factory, and that's Coventry Metalworks. This is Lyran territory. A very, very famous factory. A brilliant factory, actually. I tell you why I love Coventry's, because they're very, very famous and well known for creating medium and light mechs. When you think about the Lyran experience with mechs, in that they love their big assaults and heavies, that's a really unique place for them to be. And I think out of all the kind of Lyran, production going on, they are the most interesting, the most dynamic. They've got like a lot of innovation. In terms of other mechs that they're kind of famous for producing, it's the Commando, the Hollander, and the Phoenix Hawk, but they produce loads. But they're the kind of three that really kind of stand out as quite famous mechs. And all three of those are very distinct, very, very solid mechs. Commando in particular is really, really useful. You know, little 25-ton mech with a really decent level of firepower. It's a real staple of the Lyran forces. You find it a lot there. The Hollander is a completely niche, weird mech. It's got the Gauss rifle on its shoulder. It's a 35-ton mech, but still, if you see a Gauss rifle wielding Hollander on the battlefield, you take note, because that can do some damage, especially given how fast it is, and it's quite hard to hit. Well, not that fast, but you know what I mean. Like it's not like a meandering assault mech with two Gauss rifles that you can just beat down. It's a quick mech that can get in and potentially do rear shots, things like that. And the Phoenix Hawk, which is a great little mech, the 45-tonner, good jump capacity, good range of weaponry. So they're a really solid factory is Coventry Metalworks. Really, I really, really like them. I think they're very interesting place, given that they're completely outside of the norm of what you'd expect from the Lyrans around them and what they produce. I think as well, it probably works for them in a marketing sense, because it gives them a real unique selling point. It's if you want to kind of go up against the Draconis Combine, who are hammering our assault mechs with their tiny little light mechs because they're basically rear-shotting us to death, maybe you do need a cheeky little commando to kind of act as a shield to that, to hunt a kill, the opponent's light mechs, things like that anyway. Now, I'll get into this. I'm going to kind of go on to the Centurions. This is obviously Flex sheets, which is an amazing resource. If you don't know about this, you should absolutely get into it. I actually have now migrated completely to this. I've got rid of all my old paper, which was all laminated, and I used to do all the, the little dots and stuff like that. I now just completely use Flex sheets. I know that a lot of people are hesitant to get into the technological side of it, and they prefer the old paper and pen. All I can say is this, that as long as you bring a power source, and as long as you have somewhere to kind of put your computer or your tablet or your phone, whatever, maybe not your phone, I don't think you can do that on Flex, but what I do, little pro tip, I actually have a music stand, and I put my laptop, which is only a small laptop, put that on the music stand, put that beside me, and then you can basically, you and your opponents can take control of the mouse and just kind of, do things like put damage on when you need it. Very, very easy. You can all, as long as you can all see the screen and you can all kind of see what's going on, I find it a much healthier way to play BattleTech, and it's a lot quicker because if you kind of get rid, let's say we destroy the AC-10 here, you can see it just automatically tells you it's no longer viable. Likewise, if we put our heat up to a certain level, you can see that it brings down your walking and movement, puts them down to 0. So you not have to constantly look at it. It basically highlights it in red, shows you what the problems are. Anyway, that's my little unpaid advert over for Flex, because I love Flex. I think they're a great BattleTech resource. Now, what we're looking at here is the date, first of all. So the Centurion, so the CN9-A is 2801. The Hunchback is, you can see here, 2819. So 18 years difference between these two. And in my kind of headcanon, this is what I kind of think. And keep in mind, this is like the Succession Wars era, so things are going a little bit back. I was going to swear then. Things are going a little bit crazy between the, the inner sphere powers. They're all at war. They're all kind of grinding each other's militaries to death, and basically they just need numbers. They need to throw mechs and resources to try and get the one-upmanship on their opponent, so they can steal their factories and planets and resources and that kind of thing. So you've kind of got a situation here where I would assume that different factories who are, for want of a better term, friendly to each other. Now, I use that term loosely, but keep in mind that this is a Fedsuns and a Lyran Commonwealth head office base here, and those are two powers that don't traditionally fight, mostly because they don't share a border, but also because they don't actually, put another way, they actually have very similar cultural ties. The Lyrans are Germanic, kind of in terms of their leadership, and the Fedsuns are French-British in terms of their leadership. So you can see there's some kind of cultural norm or understanding between the two. And in my kind of headcanon, what I thought was, and I don't, this might be written down somewhere because it seems quite plausible to me, but some plucky little go-getter from Coventry called someone up at Korean Enterprise and said, "Can we do a tour of your factories? We're looking for some ideas on medium mechs." Went there because, again, these are not traditional enemies. Maybe they had some kind of tie-in and sharing data and things like that, which a lot of companies do. I'm sure it's no different in BattleTech. And whoever it was, some smart aleck got there, took one look at the Centurion, saw all the problems with the Centurion, and then spent however many years it took them to design the Hunchback. They weren't obviously going to do the Centurion because they'd have to, create their own chassis and, change all their manufacturing logistics and things like that. So he probably just thought, or she thought to herself, I'm just going to retcon this idea, and I'm just going to create our variant within the Hunchback that is far, far superior to this and fulfills that role, that direct fire medium mech that can kind of get into the fight very, very quickly and stomp the opponent. And that's kind of how I see it in my mind, because there is so many similarities between these two mechs. Time difference is so close, and it's with two powers that don't really have any animosity towards each other. Anyway, let's get into the comparison here. So first of all, I've got the Sana pages up so we can have a look at the battle value and the cost, and that's quite an important factor. So you can see the Centurion comes in about 3.5 million C-bills. The Hunchback as well comes in just under, so a little bit cheaper, but you kind of say it's, there's about 25,000 C-bill difference between them, which is really not very much in terms of BattleTech and BattleTech and mechs. The one thing that is important as a metric, though, between them is the battle value. And as you would expect, the Hunchback is worth a little bit more. It's actually worth 122 more battle value, only using 2.0 here. So it's 1041 for the Hunchback, and it's 945 for the Centurion. Now, for me, and I'll do the comparison shortly, but there's absolutely no way in hell that I'd ever take a Centurion if I had this Hunchback as an option. That extra 122 battle value is absolutely worth it. It's worth paying that cost to get it in the Force, because it's just such a better mech. It does its role so much more effectively than the Centurion does. So that's kind of the cost things out of the way. Let's get into the loadouts, heat management. Sorry, I just knocked my microphone then. Things like that. So The weapon loadout for the Centurion, which is quite famous, I mean, this is a very famous medium mech, an AC-10, LRM-20, 2 M lasers. However, and quite annoyingly, one of those M lasers is on the centre torso rear, which kind of disqualifies it as a weapon. Now, I actually am not averse to rear-facing weapons. I know most people hate them. I can't say I hate them, especially when it's an M laser and it only weighs 1 ton. And they can be useful, but I think only on assault mechs or very heavy mechs. Because if a light mech gets into your kind of rear arc, I think it's almost like a little bit of a dissuader to say, look, if you do that, I do have my medium laser that will do decent levels of damage to a light mech. So I'm not averse I'm not averse rear-facing medium lasers. However, not when you only have 4 weapons on the board. That is a sacrifice that is absolutely not worth it. Even though the Centurion is a relatively average speed mech coming in at 4.6 and it has no jump jets, I still think that is a massive waste of a medium laser, to a point where your maximum damage, even though, and this is deceptive, it obviously comes in at an alpha strike of 25. Although on an LRM-10, I mean, you're going to have to be hitting box cart double sixes to kind of make sure you get the full 10. Actually, no, it's not true, is it? I think you need it. I can't remember what it is on an LRM-10. Oh, no, it tells us here, actually. Yeah, okay, we did 11 or a 12 on the 10 cluster. Another thing I love about Flex, you get the little cluster tables here inbuilt into the sheets. So, yeah, I mean, if you kind of average it out, you'd probably say that the chances are you'd hit with 6 points of damage. Look, from the looks of that chart there anyway, on your LRM strikes. If you kind of say that your alpha strike's going to come in at between 15 and 20, if you hit with everything and you get some successes with it, that's average, which you'd expect from an average 50-ton mech. It's not terrible, but not great. The LRM-10 as well also has a problem of having no synergy with the other weapons. So I think the idea with the Centurion is that you'd use the LRM-10 from a distance before you kind of close in. But the LRM-10 becomes very, very redundant once you kind of get into medium range with your M lasers, and not so much the AC-10, because the AC-10's got pretty decent range. But it's a difficult mech to kind of get right. You need to really find that optimized range, which is probably going to be around 6-7 inches from your, or 6-7 hexes from your opponent. But I don't like that in general. Especially the other added complication in this is the ammo, which the LRM-10 brings to the table. I can accept it on an AC-10 because it delivers such decent levels of damage with its shells. But when you have 4 points of ammo there on the side torsos, I mean, that is just asking for trouble. These are, big old ammo bins as well. It's not, it's not like it's an AC2 that you can just kind of dump out. If you get rid of the AC10 ammo, then you really kind of mitigate your chances late on in a game of doing damage, because you probably run out of ammo at that point. So it's just not great. I think you could, if you're playing ammo dump, you'd probably use the LRM-10 a couple of times and then just get rid of the ammo as soon as you close in. But again, it's difficult. 4 points of ammo on something that has 2 independent heat sinks. Luckily, they put them both in the torso, so they didn't put them in the legs. So there's the LRM-10 there as well. So if your LRM-10 gets destroyed, that's obviously better than taking the ammo hit. But it's just risky, not fun, not cool. And I just, the more that you look at this mech, the more you realise how problematic it is in basically most areas, especially in Succession Wars era where there's no case. So if you take the ammo hit, your mech basically explodes. Another point as well is heat management, which is actually not too bad for this mech. It comes in at a heat of 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 13. With 10 single heat sinks, so it's got a +3 on the heat metric. No jump jets as well, so the very maximum heat you can generate in a turn is 15 if you run. That's actually okay. I'm actually completely fine with that, especially completely fine with that given that one of the M lasers is in the centre rear torso, so you're probably not going to be using that anyway. So you can pretty much call this mech heat neutral. great. In terms of armour, yeah, not sold, I'm afraid. We'll see how like lacking it is when you kind of go to the Hunchback. The reason I'm not sold is because it really kind of lacks side torso armor, which leaves it very susceptible to potential crits on those ammo points, which I just don't like that at all. Yeah, it's a shame. I think like, you know, it's for me as well, it's got too much rear armor. Like whoever designed this mech was a bit of a paranoid person, because they've got that rear M laser and it's like got too much armor on its rear side. So just some odd choices there. So that's the Centurion, which again, it's not a bad mech. To me it's completely average. It lacks like synergy in its weaponry. It's got very dangerous like ammo bins, but in terms of like heat management and mobility, not bad. Like if you were going to bring that to a battlefield, it can certainly do a job for you. That's what I'd say. But now we're going to see just how bad it is in comparison to the Hunchback. So this is the Hunchback-4H. So same movement profile, 4.6, which you'd expect, completely like standard for a tanky medium mech. Weapon loadout now though. Weapon loadout, 1 AC-10. Awesome, obviously. 4 medium lasers. So none of them in the rear either. So it's effectively got 3 more medium lasers than the Centurion. Big difference, make of that. And a small laser in the head, just for good measure. Now, in terms of its like critical hit table here, why I really, really like this, straight away you can see that it's bulked up all its heat sinks in that left torso, which makes your survivability far, far greater, because you've only got well, this is how I would play this. So just bear with me for a second, because obviously there are still 2 points of ammo here, and one of them is problematic because it's on its own in that 4 to 6 category. However, how I would play this, I would run in with the Hunchback. It's got very good levels of armor as well, which we'll go on to, so it probably will be able to kind of get into the fight, given that the range on the AC-10 is pretty decent, more than the regular AC-20, which the Hunchback traditionally takes. What I'd probably do is, when I've got like full armor and I'm proud and I'm happy and I'm going in there and I'm running and I'm potentially getting to gear up for some shooting, I'd draw from this ammo bin, and I don't think I'd double tap, I think I'd single tap in the first instance, but after I'd got a couple of shots off over a couple of turns, I'd then dump all the ammo. So I'll just get rid of all this, get that down to 0, and then I'd just draw on, you know, you have 10 shots left, and that's probably where I'd start double tapping, if you're playing the double tap rules. If you don't know, there are rules in like the extended rules as written for BattleTech, which say that an AC can operate like a UAC weapon. It's just got a heightened chance of jamming, or even worse, it's got a heightened chance of the shell exploding. It's not a heightened chance. You have to roll snake eyes basically when you shoot for that to happen, so it's quite unusual. But at that point there, you've got 5 shots left. So that's how I'd play that. It looks a lot less dangerous than it probably seems, because you've only got a 1 in 6 chance then of getting the ammo hit, which is obviously fantastic. There's no LRM on here either, so we don't have any other ammo components, unlike the Centurion, to worry about. So it's just that. That makes me feel a lot more comfortable with this mech. In terms of its rest of its loadout, you can see it's got 2 M lasers on the right torso, which again is quite useful, because you've got a little bit of a chance of keeping your autocannon 10 if a crit gets on that right torso, and just taking one of the M lasers out. When we're talking about crits though, it's actually quite difficult to do on this mech, because it's got really, really good levels of armor. I mean, just look at that for a difference maker. Like, you know, the Centurion, which was sat on 13 points on the torsos, this one's sat on 20s. And obviously more armor than on the center torso. They've got very similar armor levels, I think, on the legs and on the arms. Hunchback's got more on the leg, but same on the arms. But most importantly, its distribution of armour is a lot better. You see, the Hunchback here only has that 5 points on the centre in the rear, 4 on the torsos, whereas the Centurion's coming in with that silly amount there, which is completely wasted, really. I mean, it's not wasted if a little Jenner gets up behind you and shoots in your rear arc, but generally speaking, I'd much prefer to have it in my torsos, given the ammo on the Centurion there. Finally, heat management. Now, heat management on this chap comes in at 3, 6, 9, 12, 15, 16. 13 single heat sinks. That to me is absolutely fine. That's a +3. So it's not as heat efficient as the Centurion. They're the two things that I'd say that the Centurion has just slightly. It has better range because it's got the LRM10 in there, but I don't consider that to be a major factor. And the Centurion is effectively heat neutral, but again, that's not great, really. Like, I'm not looking at that and being like, oh, that gives it a big advantage. The Hunchback, though, given that it can do an alpha strike of, what's that, 10, 20... wow, is that? I didn't realise it was that 33 that comes in at an alpha strike if you're in close range. If you kind of then suggest, if you average that out and say that you're probably going to be doing like 20 points of damage in a turn, I think that's really, really solid for a medium mech. It's another reason why this mech is so superior to its like regular counterpart, the one that's got the AC-20 in it. Because for the AC-20 to be effective, you've got to get into range, which is short range of an opponent. Whereas you can do almost like not a skirmishing role, but you can kind of run this as a brawler, where it's got a little bit of speed and it can kind of, get into those interesting fire arcs and just deliver its like full alpha strike and deliver a lot of mayhem to an enemy. Especially if the dice are with you and, let's say you get on like the right-hand side of a mech that you're trying to get, destroy its right-hand side. For whatever reason, maybe there's ammo in there that you want to crit, maybe there's a weapon there you want to take out. If you're delivering that 20 to 33 potential points of damage in a turn and not generating that much heat, for a medium mech, that can be very, very good. So, yeah, like I said, for me, this is a no-brainer. I was delighted that I did some research on it and that I didn't actually have the Centurion model and that I opted to go for the Hunchback, which kind of I have spare and I can now just kind of mod it to reflect the 4H variant. So I think that's about it. Anyway, I've covered everything there. That's my little synopsis. So get behind the 4H Hunchback. I think it's a bit of a must-take medium mech for me now. I mean, I knew it existed. I knew there was a Hunchback variant with the AC-10, but that's one of the wonderful things about BattleTech is when you kind of research it and then you kind of see these little nuanced things that you come across, you're like, oh, it's so much better. And then I kind of started to look into all those like dates and being like, someone from Coventry knew. Someone from Coventry went there, they saw the failings of the Centurion, and they went back and they just created this amazing Lyran variant. Anyway, there you are. I think I'll leave it there. So I'll thank you very much for watching, and I'll hopefully catch you again next time.